Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and I'm coming to you with another edition of the Stanton Friedman Files. This is episode 8. This was actually episode 11, and I've moved it up because I found a file in Stanton's file which inspired me to do this presentation. This is a presentation I've thought about for many years, and I actually did part of the PowerPoint a number of months ago. So when I saw this slide, I figured it was time to do this. This is based on one single piece of paper from the Stanton Friedman files, but it's kind of an interesting piece of paper. I've been asked a number of times. I've been in this now for almost 45 years, and people have always asked me, has anything changed over your 45 years? And I always make sure I tell people the fact that it's completely different. It's a completely different world. There's almost nothing that's the same as it was in 1975. And people don't realize this. So here's the one piece of paper from Stanton's file, which will inspire the rest of this lecture. This is a document from 1979 from Stanton's files. It's from an article in the East-West Journal, and it's titled Space People Most Commonly Seen. So you got to keep in mind, this is 1979, and these are the most popular aliens from all the sightings from 1947, when people really started to record this stuff, till 1979. And you will note one very peculiar thing. There are no grays, there are no reptilians, and there are no mantids, no praying mantis beings. Those are predominantly the number one beings we have today, or the sort of the energy beings. But here you have a situation where they're not even discussed in the 1970s. And that's one of the things I always try to point out to people, but unless you were there and lived through it, I guess it's hard to see that there basically was no grays. Grays are a thing that have just popped up in the last couple of decades, and they've sort of taken over the mentality or the thinking of most people. But when I started in 1975, this was not a topic of conversation. The idea of grays started in 1961. This is the first reported. This is the Betty and Barney Hill case, coming out of Canada, going back to the United States. The thing that I always like to point out here, and I'll read it here, the figures, according to Barney Hill, were of human form, dressed in shiny black uniforms and black caps with peaks or bills on them, which could be seen when the figures turned their heads. Now, I've always known this is very peculiar. This is like waving a red flag. In fact, it's like taking a red flag and hitting you over the head with it repeatedly. You have an alien with a hat on. And that should be a real red flag to determine that maybe we should take a closer look as to what's really going on here. Now, maybe the aliens have got a baseball team they're in favor of, or they want to keep the sun out of their eyes or whatever, but it's very strange that you would have a report of an alien with a hat on. What we see in my view of the UFO phenomena is that there's a lot of patterns that people really haven't sort of picked up on. These are not 100% direct patterns, but you take 1947, this is basically when everything took off, when sort of like the new age of ufology, where we had a bunch of crashes all the same year, and the sightings just took off, and it's been a deal ever since. Before 1947, none of the presidents had to deal with this. The only president that had to deal with it was Roosevelt, who got a message from Los Angeles during the overflight, the Los Angeles invasion story of whatever it was, 1942. And he just wrote back and said who's in charge of the air aid, calling the alarms for the raids, the air raids. That was the only document. Other than that, there's no discussion of UFOs in presidential files going back before Truman. Truman was the first one to handle it. It sort of opened up. Spiritualism itself, the whole concept, most people don't realize it actually only started in 1948 with the Fox twins and the Rappings, and that led to the women's suffrage movement. Most of the spiritualists, women who started in 1948 and it spread, this is a large part of how women got the right to vote in the United States. It was these spiritualists, and people don't realize there's these very sort of bizarre patterns, as if it's either random or there's a pattern behind what appears to be randomness, that things are not happening just by accident. 1952, the first aliens, I will maintain the first sort of public discussion of people seeing aliens. It was not in 1947 when the sighting started. It was a couple of days after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb in 1952, and Adamski and Williamson reported these beings landing in the footprints and all that kind of stuff. So this is not something that's been around all the time. These are sort of patterns where these things have sort of appeared. The first gray, as I said, was 1961. The first cattle mutilation, 1967. And you may find one bizarre cattle mutilation back before then, but basically it started with a big rash in 67 and just took off. And basically, I will maintain, really doesn't happen anymore. People will say, oh, it's happening. There was one, I think, or two cows in Washington this year, but other than that, it's happening in Argentina. So people say it's still going on. The question is, well, why did it stop in the United States and go to Argentina? These are the patterns that I say, in order to understand what's going on, we have to look at these patterns because they definitely are going to mean something. And the first crop circle wasn't until 1983. There was simple, what were called, saucer nests in wheat here in Canada and in Australia before then, but there was no sort of complex multi-circles until 1983, and they took over for ground traces. The big thing used to be the 4,000 ground traces where the UFO would land and leave tripod marks. Well, that was replaced by crop circles. The ground trace stuff, I maintain, doesn't happen anymore. It hasn't happened for decades. It used to happen all the time where it would burn out a field and leave these tripod marks. That's all gone away and the crop circles have taken over. So there are these patterns that I say we should be taking a look at to look for answers as to what are we up against and what's really going on. Again, we go back to this thing where 1979, there is really, this is, an article discussing humanoid sightings, and basically none of the three major aliens that people talk about today are in that article, as if they basically didn't exist at that point. The first abduction case, if we go to aliens being abductees, the first abduction was the Boas case in South America, and it was not Grays. This is the first rumored abduction case. You can see, and he was very clear about what he believed this being looked like with the helmet on. This is almost like from the 1950s, like what people would see an alien with, a helmet, like going to outer space. And then he had sex with this female being on the left-hand side, which again doesn't look like a Gray. She's got hair. She looks like us, very human looking and very 1950-ish. So the question is this what he saw? Does this have anything to do? Why did the beings change from these beings from the 1950s to the beings that we describe today? So in 1961, we have the Grays, which are called is where the Gray term comes from. And we have the next abduction after that. We have the Boas, and then we have the Benny and Barney Hill. What most people don't realize, I started in 1975, and abduction was really not a topic of conversation. I mean, it was basically, we knew Betty and Barney Hill. This is the 1967 case that happened with Herb Shermer, the abduction case in Nebraska. But again, you will see the abduction. This is 67 abduction, which all of us knew about in 1975, but it wasn't a gray either. Then we go to the next abduction that was known in 1975, and that was the Pascagoula case in 1973 with Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson. It wasn't a gray either. And yet we have this idea that grays are the abductees. And yet before 1975, we have this situation where, other than the one bizarre gray running around with these grays running around with hats on, we don't really have the grays. We have this one from 1975. This is the year I started. This is just south of me in North Dakota. This is West Fargo. Buffalo, North Dakota is where this abduction took place. There were actually 2 Minuteman missile silos within about 2 miles of this location on Highway 94, the interstate, going towards Montana. And Sandy Larson was taken. And this was the being that she described. Doesn't look like a gray to me. And this was she had, I think, 10 objects that were coming. She was picked up, missing time, the whole bit, but the being didn't look anything like a gray. Then came 1975, and you have Travis Walton's case. That was a couple of months after my sighting in May of 1975. And Travis describes them with eyes the size of quarters, and they don't look like grays either. They're starting to look a little bit like grays, but they're basically, the eyes are different, and you see something's wrong here. It's not exactly the pattern that you would expect. They were already in 1975, and all the major abductions, they don't fit into the scenario. The grays are really not part of it. And then you have these human people, almost with the helmet, almost like the outer space people, who are there. So this is a pattern I think we should be taking a look at. Now we've got one document has just come out, which talks about this idea that these are high-level people. I'll describe this in a second, that there are no abductions. And of course, everybody's going to obviously say, well, what the hell are you talking about, Grant? It's quite obvious. It's as obvious as the world is flat. You put a level on the ground, you can see it's flat. Seeing is believing. It's very obvious that people are being abducted. Don't be stupid. People are being abducted. And yet you have these bizarre little patterns that seem to indicate there's something wrong with the worldview scenario that we're building, because it has a lot of cracks, and when you start looking carefully at it, you start finding all sorts of things that really don't make any sense. Tom DeLonge mentioned this. This is his website that he had in 2012, Strange Times, and he has promoted very heavily the idea that the grays are bad guys, and that's why the promotion is being made to the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee that there are these possible evil aliens who are here. And here's in his website 2012, U.S. military making plans for alien invasion. And Tom has promoted this and is being promoted by To the Stars. The idea that we need money, we need funding in order to protect ourselves from this possible alien invasion. Tom has said quite clearly on the record that the UFO phenomena is a bad story. It is not a positive story. Here's his actual audio.
Well, guess what? UFOs are bad news. Deal with it. They just are.
So this is the scenario that's now been built, is that we have these evil grays, and they're abducting people, and this is bad news, and they're effing ankle biters, and we need to take care of them. Even here's what Tom said: the UFO phenomena has a hive mentality, a hive mind. Now that is referring to the grays. The grays do have a situation where they are working towards one purpose. They're all doing their job. They're not self-serving. They don't have this capitalist thing where they're all working for each other. There's no, designer furniture, clothes. There's no, leather couches. There's no furniture. There doesn't seem any food or anything. They're just sort of doing their things. And so Tom puts out talking, and he's basically talking about the grays here. These creatures potentially don't have souls. They're like clones. So if they don't have souls, well, then we can objectify them like animals, and we can do whatever we want to them, because they're not one of God's creatures, or they don't have any souls. So they worship their own technology to some degree, but they feed off fear and negativity. The one thing that they cannot stand is the frequency of elevated human consciousness. So we have this worldview being built of these, less than nice guys who are running around abducting people and causing trouble. Now, is this fair? Is this true? Is this true that people are being abducted? Are people being taken against their will with nothing to really stop it? What about pre-birth memories? We have the Moody Blues, the band Moody Blues, who basically described they were taken in 1967, going from Manchester into London. They all had missing time. They all basically have sort of admitted that yes, they were probably taken, and they had pre-birth memories of agreeing that they were in a room with some elders, and they were told they were going to go in, they were going to be musicians, and they were going to play this role in the earth. So does that play a role? It was a UFO experiencer, an abductee from St. Catharines, Steve Boucher, a friend of mine. He has pre-birth memories as well, where he was told by a being that he had to go to the earth, that he really didn't want to go. His entire band was abducted in 1972, just outside of St. Catharines, Ontario. So do these count? So the question is this people being taken against their will, or are people making a soul contract? This is something that I think we have to sort out. Now, if you talk to regressionists, a lot of the regressionists will say, if you regress people back and ask them, did you agree to this? They will all say, yeah, we agreed to this soul contract. And if it's not a soul contract, if it is something outside of ourselves, and we have no defense against this, and it's a random event, and can this be a defense for when we die, an afterlife defense? So we can go and say an afterlife, and we can get into a situation, if this is true, that we are being taken against our will, and this is happening without any sort of input from us, then we can say, it's not fair. I was abducted. It's totally unfair. And it doesn't really matter. You can say to whoever's doing the judgment after you die, you say, well, you expected me to do something with this life? I mean, I was a total failure. I didn't do anything, but I was abducted. I mean, what do you expect me to do? I mean, you allowed this to happen to me, and we can use it as an excuse. Same as I can use the excuse, I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, the coldest major city in the world, totally unfair. Anything that happens in my life, I can say, I deserve to fail. It's not my responsibility. It's your fault because you allowed me to be born in Winnipeg. Or I can say Hillary messed with her emails. That was totally unfair. So I didn't do anything. I messed up my life, but Hillary messed up her emails. So I should be cut a break. There's a deep state working against us. And this is a big thing in the UFO community, is the thing where, we have this against us, and that's totally unfair. But maybe if there's a soul agreement, we agreed to come in at this time and this place against the deep state or whoever it is to work. That's why we came here at this time. Did I say how it was unfair that I was abducted? We can keep running this program that I'm not responsible for anything I did wrong in life because I was an abductee. It was unfair. The FBI investigated Friedman. It probably investigates me. It probably investigates most UFO researchers. It's totally unfair. But again, if it's a soul contract, we agreed to come in at this time and this place in this very unfair environment. And we can even use the argument, how can there be a God if he lets me be abducted? You can say to God, I mean, I can see why there are atheists. You're a total idiot. You allowed me to be abducted. You allowed me to be in the deep state. You allowed all this kind of stuff. And we can totally not take responsibility for our lives after we die and blame all sorts of outside factors unless it's a soul contract. And then we have to take personal responsibility for where we are. And finally, of course, my mother-in-law upset me, which explains why I have all my problems in life, and it's not my fault. And the dog ate my homework, of course. That's one we use in life, and we can always use it after we die. I didn't do it because the dog ate my homework. Now, when it comes to all this stuff, I say there's a pattern, and I say you got to watch the pattern. I think there are patterns here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there are patterns that we need to look at. This is a guy we chased around for 8 years. This is the former president of Penn State University at 14 honorary doctorate degrees, co-developer of the homing torpedo, the developer of the Institute for Defense Analysis, the Jasons, was on the Defense Science Board, Assistant Secretary of Defense, just unbelievable, 15 years as president of Penn State University. And he said to us when we were talking to him, you assume too many things. Most of the things are wrong. Then he laughed. You jump to hasty conclusions. And that, I think, is what we have to look at to make sure that we're not making hasty conclusions and just assuming things and going along with them. Because Walker said that most of the things that we believe about the UFO phenomena are wrong. Now, I've talked about this. I've given this lecture. This is part of a noetic experience I had about 3 years ago. And it basically took a look and told me to look at the whole idea. Is it a material universe or is it a conscious universe? What are we really dealing with? What is the world? Is it made out of consciousness or is it made out of nuts and bolts? And this is very critical, as I'll show you in a minute, to understanding what the phenomena is, what the intelligence behind the phenomena is, what we're up against. And of course, the one life versus reincarnation. So if it's one life, if we are biological robots in a random, meaningless universe, and there's only one life, well then we may be victims, and that's the way it is. But if reincarnation is a fact, and there's probably more evidence for reincarnation than there is for UFOs, then if reincarnation is a fact, there's a very good chance that before we came in, we agreed to do something, we agreed to work on something, and we are ultimately responsible for the decisions we came in this world. We decided who to be born to, where to be born, what we were going to do, and all we have to be concerned of is what agreement did we make, what are we supposed to do, and everything outside of ourselves really doesn't matter. It only matters what we do. So these are two important factors that I think that have to be worked into the UFO problem in terms of understanding basic reality. Because if you get basic reality wrong, nothing else is really going to matter. Is it physical or is it spiritual? And this comes to the situation where I will maintain that the phenomena is going to be a lot more spiritual than people think it is. It's going to be a lot less physical than people think it is. It is going to have no hint of capitalism, and it's going to be something that's going to upset an awful lot of people because basically they're either waiting for an enemy or they're waiting for Santa Claus. That's the way they want to see the intelligence behind the phenomena. Here's John Mack, who worked on this problem. He started to see this as well. He was asked about this thing, is it spiritual, is it physical? He said it's both. It's both literally physical, it's happening to a degree. It's also some kind of psychological, spiritual experience occurring and originating perhaps in another dimension. So the phenomena stretches us, or it asks us to stretch to open realities that are not simply the literal physical world, but to extend into the possibility that there may be other unseen realities from which our consciousness, our, if you will, learning processes over the past several hundred years have closed us off. And so this is what I'm saying, and John Mack had come to this conclusion as well. We have to look at it from a different perspective, that we may have got the basic reality wrong. And we're making a simple assumption that the world is flat, and it's very obvious, and seeing is believing, and that may not be true. This is what he also said. He said, physical, or as you go deeper and deeper into the person's consciousness, into the experience, they will discover what is called dual identity. In other words, that they are both human in one dimension, but they also are themselves, have an alien identity, that they are participatory in this reproductive hybrid program as if they were altogether part of it, and that they may in fact even experience themselves as aliens. And this is the concept that we may be the aliens and the aliens may be us, that if you have a problem with aliens, you may have been an alien your last time, or that you may be the alien next time, to learn empathy and understanding. And you talk a lot of people who will say, I believe that is my family. I believe they are my true family. There's a lot of musicians, John Denver being the primary one, who believed very strongly that he came from the constellation Lyra. He actually writes a song about it, which was released after he died. So you have a lot of these people who believe this very direct connection, that they are connected to these beings, that we are working together, that we may have come in here under a soul contract to work with these beings to do whatever it is, raise human consciousness, or whatever the ultimate game is. You see in Beyond UFOs, this is the thousands and thousands of experiencers who have actually taken the poll, so people can have whatever opinions they want, but when you actually start looking at the data, you actually take the 600 some odd questions that were asked of these thousands of experiencers, you start seeing very different patterns than what you would get from just a simple story about evil gray aliens who are abducting people and doing genetic hybrid production. 53% provided a spiritual message. 28% of these experiencers who filled out the survey, and this is the actual scientific data, were given a communication about life after death. 26% were given a message about reincarnation. 26% interacted with ETs in a past life. 69% believe UFO experiences were arranged or designed by higher intelligence. And this comes to this idea that this may be something that we have agreed to participate in, and that the idea that there's just simple bad aliens here to make our life troublesome is missing the point. I've quoted this numerous times. This is a sort of discussion that Bud Hopkins had and John Mack had at Boston. And as you know, they both saw the thing quite differently. John Mack saw things as a sort of a spiritual transformation, that there was a spiritual aspect. Bud wrote the book Intruders, and he just saw them as intruders. I wish they would just go away and leave us alone. He saw very negative, saw very highly dominated by grays who were doing this hybrid program and causing a lot of stress to people. So during this lecture, here's what at one point John Mack made this very interesting point. He said, there's an irony here he's talking to Bud. He says, there's an irony here in a way, but because I'm supposed to be the psychiatrist here, right? I'm supposed to see the really troubled, disturbed people. And it's almost seems as if but talking to Bud, you're seeing the worst cases from the mental health standpoint. And I'm seeing the sort of more seeking ones, which may have to do more with to have something more to do with who we are and how we work. And so he's basically talking about this thing where Bud and John may have something to do with the type of beings that their people are seeing, or the people that are attracted to them as therapists. And John Wheeler, who came up with the wormhole theory and black hole theory, basically sort of summed it up. It's a participatory universe. This whole idea that there's no observed phenomena. There's no real phenomena, unless it's an observed phenomena, that we are manifesting. We are participatory in the universe that's happening around us. And that takes away the victim mentality, and it basically says you are in this thing, you are the one that's producing this, and we can no longer go to being the victims who are pawns, or not pawns, but corks floating down a stream and being buffeted around by all sorts of outside forces. Here's Kathy Marden, who I asked Kathy Marden about this soul contract thing, because she's one of the people who does a lot of regressions, and she said she had thought about it, and at one point she decided that she would get a regression, and she said she actually heard the words come out of her mouth, and that she had agreed for this situation, that she had agreed to whatever she's doing in this life, that it was not as random as people want to make this thing out to be. Back again to the aliens with the hats. This is the documents. This is the Eric Davis notes that leaked, and at the very end, I haven't really read this document, but at the very end I heard that, and I pulled the very end of the document, because at the very end of the document, that's where it comes down to this thing, and this is a very high-level guy. This is the one guy who sort of, the document claims this guy actually got a briefing. Nobody else could get to the real story of getting a briefing on what was going on, and this Gansler guy said UFOs are real, so-called alien abductions are not real. And that, of course, strikes people and saying, this is totally crazy. It's very evident that this is taking place. And yet at this very high level, somebody is saying, no, this is not what's happening. Here's another one. This is Kit Green, who used to run the CIA Weird Desk. This is a posting he made in 2007 on a UFO board, and he says the same thing. He says no abductions. Then he says Serpo's a hoax, and he talks about a bunch of other stuff that we've been trying to back engineer, and we're not really getting anywhere, and it's been very unsuccessful. But this idea where Kit Green said the same thing, and so I think we have to take a look at that and say, why would they say this? Maybe it's a matter of semantics, that we are misinterpreting what this actually means, and it's there's a phenomena going on, but it's not quite what we think it is. Here's where and I've spent a lot of time on this and talking to experiencers. I say, if you want to figure out what's going on with the phenomena, you have to stop looking at UFO photos, or relying on UFO photos, or relying on pieces of metal, or this kind of stuff, and you have to start talking to the experiencers, and the experiencers will start telling you all sorts of bizarre things. The one key thing is this idea about what is actual reality. Because we see the world as being flat, is it actually flat? If the sun seems to go around the earth, is it actually going around the earth? That when you start to get more information, the more information you get, the more you realize that there are more than 5,000 stars in the sky. There is more than one galaxy, which was believed by Einstein and Planck and Heisenberg and all these people, because before 1929 everybody believed there's only one galaxy. Now we're up to 2 trillion galaxies. So the more information you get, the more you realize that your past information, your past belief systems are wrong. One of the things that I think is going to be, it's already sort of been shown quite clearly, is the idea that screen imaging is a big part of what this phenomenon is about. And it basically says you cannot believe what you are seeing. Although we want to believe that when you see the world as flat, it's flat. Here's my friend Candace Powers. I always, when I ever have her in a meeting, I always want to get her to tell the story of the rabbit. She had a story of the rabbit. She was a singer working out of Oklahoma, going home from a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning to her farm, and she runs into this rabbit. I'll make a long story short. This takes place, it takes a long time. It appears to take an hour. This rabbit's in the middle of the road. She doesn't want to leave the road because she's going to be in the ditch, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and so she's trying to get this rabbit to move down the road, and the rabbit is blocking the road, and of course this whole thing takes a long time. And then she tells the story to her boyfriend, and her boyfriend says, Candace, I think you need to be regressed. So she goes to Bud Hopkins and she gets regressed. And of course, there's no rabbit. It's an abduction experience. The craft is there. She can't tell what the beings look like. But this is the whole idea. You cannot necessarily believe what you're seeing, because this phenomena has the ability to screen image. Here's another one. Mike Cleland has written 2 books on this, and Mike Cleland is known as the owl guy. He writes repeatedly about these 4-foot owls, that people see these 4-foot owls standing in front of their car, or they see them in, I have one fellow's A-level, A-class Hollywood guy who told me that he and his wife had a 5-foot owl in the bathroom standing on the counter. And when he went to get his camera, he went racing back in there, and of course the owl was gone. So the question is there a 5-foot owl standing on his counter? Is there a 4-foot owl standing in front of a car? Or are these screen images and something else is actually going on? You cannot necessarily in this phenomena believe what you're seeing. Here's a prime example. We have the Betty and Barney Hill aliens with the hats. And we also have shadow people. People have had these shadow people experiences. A lot of abductees see these beings. I talked to Chris Bledsoe about his. two-dimensional beings that go along the wall. And I said to Chris, did you see the one with the hat? Yeah, I saw the one with the hat. So the question is, why does a two-dimensional shadow person need a hat? This makes no sense. It means think a little deeper. Something else is going on here. It's not necessarily a shadow person with a hat. It means something else. Again, back to the Betty and Barney Hill thing. Here's Men in Black. This is an actual from a camera where they picked up the Men in Black. They always wear these bizarre hats and these bizarre outfits. So why are they doing this? Do they really need to do this? Or is this something that we should look at and understand that this is not as what you see is what you get. Seeing is believing. Here's again the Hat Man with the shadow people, and then you see the shadowed hooded figure. So why does a shadow figure, why does a ghost need a hood? If you take a look at Chris Bledsoe, his guardian people, when he first saw them on the ship, had hoods, had hoods on. So why do you need a hood? Like why would you need this hood? Or you can take another one is Tyler D from American Cosmic, the famous book that came out last year. He's the NASA engineer. I had a personal conversation with him. He told me that he had a hooded figure at the end of his bed. So why does the being come into the room need a hood on? Here's Sparks, and this is a pretty interesting case here where he's talking about Jim Sparks. So Jim Sparks was one of the first people who really got into all the details about the screen on board the ship, about being taken through classes and stuff. And he has a man in black with the hat on that takes him to the to see the ship taking off. And so the question is, do you really need someone? Does the guy really need a hat? Is this actually a guy with a hat, or is this a being screen imaging? What is the real reality here? Journey of Souls is a prime example. I'm just writing a book called Contact Modalities, and I say that these modalities shift across all spectrums. So whether you're talking about regression, or you're talking about channeling, or you're talking about mediumship, there is a crossover with all these phenomena. And you see this in the work that was done by Dr. Michael Newton, who was a clinical psychologist who did life between life. Between he and his key students, they've done 35,000 4, 5, 6 hour regressions where they take people into the spirit world between lives, and they get them to describe what color they are, whatever goes on, and they have this great number of people who describe exactly the same thing. He had a particular story which talks about this screen imaging thing, that it goes on there as well. He tells a story about a very religious fire and brimstone preacher who had come to his office to get a regression. And during the regression, the guy started yelling, "The devil is here. Satan is in the room." And Newton said, "What do you mean Satan's in the room? Where is he?" "He's standing right in front of you." And the guy was yelling, "He's right in front of you. Can't you see him?" And Newton says, "No, I can't see him." No, describe. What does he look like?" And he says, "Well, he's got leathery skin." And he starts to describe. And Newton says, "Well, what's he wearing?" And he described what he had on his upper body. And then he says, what's on his lower body?" And he said, "Well, you can't really see. It's kind of misty. It doesn't really have a lower body." And that's when Newton said, and this is a key thing that people in the UFO world, I think, have to learn this expression. Newton said, "Take a closer look. Who is it really?" And at that point, the guy said, "Oh, it's my soul guide. He's playing games with me. I was preaching fire and brimstone, and he came as the devil to teach me a lesson." And so this is the whole idea in the UFO community. When you see an event, the thing is, take a closer look. What are we really looking at? What is the phenomena? What is the basic basis of the phenomena we're looking at? What is really going on here, instead of just sort of taking what appears to be a flat earth and just describing it. Here's my father, and with me and my sisters. My father had an experience. He 2 days before he died, he had an experience where his father, who had died in 1956, came to him. And my mother, he told my mother, and my mother asked him, said, well, what did your dad have to say? And he said, he was just here. That's all you need to know. And so he didn't describe what it was. But this is a key thing that I think people have to realize. So my grandfather comes to my father. And so if reincarnation is a fact and he's lived hundreds of thousands of times before, why would he come as my father's father? Why didn't he come as one of the other personalities that he had lived at? And the reason is because my father wouldn't have recognized who he was. He came as my father. He screen imaged. He took on a form which my father could understand in order to comfort my father before he died. So this is the whole idea, is we can even screen image. The beings are coming, but we can do it too. You see this idea that people will come as ghosts, but they will come as the screen image that people will be comforted by or will understand. Here's a book written by Sherry Wilde. Sherry Wilde had a very dramatic lifetime experience. She actually said this book was basically written for her. At one point, she's dealing with a being, a gray, by the name of Da. She's an experiencer, has been on board the ship, all the classic sort of abduction stuff. And at one point, she asked Da, she said, "Are you actually an alien?" And Da said, "No, not really." And then she said, "Well, why do you come as this ugly looking gray thing?" And Da said, "Ugly looking gray thing? Have you ever looked in the mirror? When you see those big teeth you've got, we think you're going to eat us." And so here we have a situation where she's actually asked the alien, "Are you an alien?" And he said, "No, not really." Here's Nancy Tremaine with her book Symbiosis. She has another book just about to come out. She was dealing with reptilians. And I asked her, because I helped her publish her book, I asked her, ask the aliens, "Are you actually an alien?" So in 2017, she asked her, the being that she was in contact with, whether he was actually an alien, and this is the answer she got. "We are not alien to this planet or any planet, as we have always been here." So again, it gives this question, is she actually dealing with a flesh and blood reptilian, or is this something more complex than a reptilian? Here is Yosef Ronan from Israel. He had an encounter with his beings. Now his beings were like grays, except they were green. So it's the basic story. They come into his room and they give him a bunch of material, the concept of oneness, which is the main message that the beings are putting across. He's writing a book called Oneness, and he basically asks the aliens as well, "Are you really an alien?" And here's what they tell him. "The way you see us is defined by you. When we visit your world, we temporarily have a physical body defined in a certain way, but it is not the only form or our original essence. In our dimension, there is no need for a physical body defined in a particular way as in yours. You share the definitions of reality that are given to you, but you are not yet aware of it." So basically they're saying that we can take on this physical, come in and take on this physical form, but it is not our original essence. And you have the same position as we do. Your original essence is not a human being. You just don't realize it yet. Here's, I want to show you, this goes to the high level. I've spent majority of my career trying to chase the highest level people who have answers to what's actually going on. There's no point in asking people who have opinions. Everybody's got an opinion, but there are a number of people, and there's a couple here on this page here that have high level. There's Hal Puthoff on the left side, Kid Green, formerly head of life sciences at the CIA. These two guys have potentially one of the longest held top secret SCI security clearances in the United States. They are friends. They work on various projects. They're both fascinated in the UFO subject and in understanding the reality of what we're up against. On the right here is my assistant with Jim Peniston. And Jim Peniston had a 2-day meeting with Kit Green in Illinois. And I want to read the entire thing of what they came. And this comes down to this thing. And Kit Green, they're doing an experiment with DNA, with MRIs. And so Jim Peniston has a meeting with him, and he's discussing, why do you want my DNA? Why do you're doing, what are you actually up to? And here's basically the same scenario, almost what Ronan says, almost what you get in this screen imaging thing. Kit Green, who has more information than you and I about what's going on, here's what they say. Now, this is written up in the Rendlesham Enigma, which is written by Jim Peniston. It's chapter 18, this 2-day meeting that they have in this boardroom, conference room in Illinois. And here's what Kit Green says. One of the most interesting related to this phenomena was the theory to why witnesses experiencing the same event will perceive different events from their perspective, and in some cases, a whole different set of circumstances and experiences. So it's basically saying two people can see the same object and see something totally different, from just lights to more informative detail of something physical and real. For some witnesses, the appearance between what is being perceived and what really is somehow becomes distorted, and in some cases unrecognizable. Also, it is as if from a certain distance or point of view in relation to what is being perceived, a witness will interpret the event or experience based upon his or her own preconceived views and beliefs. For example, if the witness was inclined to believe in extraterrestrials, then that was what he or she would see and would experience. In reality, what the witnesses were actually viewing was nothing like the different interpretations that existed in each of their minds. And again, it can appear differently to each of the witnesses present at the same time, the same event. The interpretation of what is being witnessed also seems to depend upon how close or far the witness is. One could only see a common safety mechanism with this part of the theory. In effect, the phenomena protects itself by confusing the perceptions of the witnesses to what actually is, in that whatever appearance is being interpreted seems to be projected into the minds of the witnesses. And again, these interpretations are based upon each individual's belief system or worldview. So basically, this is the idea is that the idea where we're manifesting, we're seeing what we see is based upon what our perception, and this is what Kit Green was talking about, that indicated that this is what they're working on. They know this problem exists, that a person's perception has an awful lot to do with what kind of being that they're describing, what kind of craft they're seeing, and that people in the same event won't describe the same sort of thing. So for a lack of better words, the phenomena seems to be able to mask or to cloak itself differently with each viewer. It's much like how esoteric knowledge or ancient symbolism works in closing itself off from the profane, remaining indecipherable to them, but will open itself up and become comprehensible to those with the eyes to see. The possibilities are endless. And of course, because the government's working on this, why are they working on this? Of course, it would be a technology that governments would die for. And the three of us sitting in the conference room agreed with this conclusion. So Jim is sitting there with his lawyer and with Kit Green, and they have this discussion, and Kit Green opens up about the fact that they realize this is a situation that exists. Here again is Jim Sparks, one of the original people that described all the various events that are now, you'll hear people describing on board the ship. He had a very clear recollection of what had happened to him. He talks about almost what Michael Newton talks about with A Life Between Life, that Michael Newton claims the souls that people that he regresses claim that we only bring 20% of our essence into the world when we're here, that 80% of our soul essence is actually still in the other world. And this is exactly what Jim Sparks says. He says, what really intrigues me is that the ETs can be 5 to 10% in this dimension on a physical plane, while the rest is in another dimension. There are dimensions out there like layers of an onion. The ETs molecularly change the vibration of something so they can be in another dimension and solid, but projected here in only 5%. So he's starting, and you got to remember, this is like years ago, decades ago, where Jim Sparks is talking about this in this book called The Keepers. They have the ability to transmit an image or an idea in your head. He's the one that actually, I think, coined the term screen imaging. He's one of the first person to use it. They have the ability to transmit an image or an idea in your head, and then you believe that that's reality. If you're the type that may be afraid of, say, demons or demonic things, then they'll portray themselves as being something dark or evil in order to get the whatever it is they're going to do, so you cooperate. If you're the type of person who is heavily believes in angelic beings and things of that nature and spirits and benevolent things, and then they'll come on that way too, so they have the ability to screen image thoughts. Their technology going into that, it's about 100% thought activated. So he's basically saying whatever they want you to you believe, they can make it appear in your head. My A-level Hollywood guy told me the same thing, that he had been told by his being that in order for them to deal with us, they go into our minds and they figure out, is this person into fear? And if you're into fear, they will use fear to teach you a lesson. And if you're into love and oneness, they will use that to teach you a lesson. That's all they can do. They can only use what's in your mind, and they will use what's in your mind to teach you a lesson. But they are basically controlling your thoughts. They reached into my head, and suddenly, this is where they're trying to get him on the table. They reached into my head, and suddenly that cold and gleaming metal examination table became green and felt. It looked like a Las Vegas dicing table. Were they going to play craps? Abruptly, my fear drained. Of course, they knew that I enjoyed a little gambling in Vegas from time to time. They had mucked around in my head enough. I wasn't exactly laughing, but I hopped off and went up to them. Well, they designed the table wrong. They had bad odds on this felt. So he said he picked up the fact that they didn't build the table right in his mind. The odds were bad, and he realized it wasn't a table, a dicing table. Abruptly, this realization twisted something in my head. Blink, the Las Vegas exam table was just a normal alien examination table again. So once he figured it out, that it was a screen image, it immediately changed back to an examination table. Here's another one he talks about. Then those blurry images changed and sharpened and abruptly started looking like two policemen. Then another blurry change, and they became two military soldiers. I could see what was up, and it didn't get to me. Sorry, I yelled inside my head. You're not frightening me. That's not going to stop me. I was just whistling in the dark. I was dead frightened. Still, I knew instinctively that I would hang on to this consciously by putting up a great stink with my will. They changed back into the previous big-headed, skinny, elfish bodies again. So the minute he realized it was a screen image, it would immediately stop and it would go back to what was actually going on. There was another one that he actually described, and this is, I was trying to find it, but I couldn't find it. It's a really interesting one where he says that these guys actually projected themselves as a military person. And Sparks realized that he was calling himself whatever rank it was, and that the uniform did not match the rank. And he said, you're no colonel or whatever it was, you haven't got the right uniform on. And he said, as soon as he said that, the uniform instantly changed to the correct uniform. So the thing was that they were using in his mind, that's the only place it could come from instantaneously, is that he was thinking of the right uniform, and they immediately screen imaged the right uniform. Here's a statement made by Paul E. Tyler, who was one of the members of the Advanced Theoretical Physics Conference that John Alexander and Ron Blackburn started. And this was a conference where it was a top secret restricted data meeting that was taking place, where they pulled all these people with top secret SCI clearances, put them in a room, and they were trying to find out who in the government is actually running this operation, what's going on. And they suddenly realized that none of them really had any sort of idea what was going on. It always appeared like either there's nothing going on or they're out of the loop. They couldn't really figure anything. But this Paul Tyler, who had worked as a captain in the U.S. Navy, it was an Armed Forces Radiologist Research Institute, ran it. And he was a medical consultant on the government's remote viewing program. He also worked on the Cash Landrum case with the radiation there. He was brought in to work on that case. He tells Ron Blackburn, who started this organization, or this sort of group with John Alexander, he said, always study UFOs from the point of view of energy, consciousness, and form, where form is negotiable. So you may think that you're looking to a gray flesh and blood alien, but as he said, form is negotiable. They can change that. The energy will stay the same. Consciousness is primary, energy is primary, but the being that you're looking at, what you think you're seeing, is negotiable. It's not necessarily what you think you're seeing. And this was reported in one of Jacques Vallée's latest books. When you take a look, and here's again where you can see the screen imaging thing, that you basically produce what you believe. I defy anybody to go to either C5 events or to the Mission Rama. This is a Zendra. This is like a portal type thing. Mission Rama is a Latino group that started in Peru and has sort of expanded around the world. And from time to time, they're able to open these Zendra events. It's sort of like a very sort of, it looks like a rainbow, very sort of thin, like a cloud, and beings will come out of this, or you'll go into the Zendra and you'll suddenly be on another planet. It's like an interdimensional gateway, like we would call a portal. And the beings come in and out of this, and this Zendra will form. And I defy anybody to show me any grays involved with Mission Rama. Their beings are all very love and light, tall beings. There are no grays. There are no evil aliens, and maintain no grays ever. And these guys have been around since 1974. They've had a lot of different events. They've described a lot of stuff, but basically they're not in a state of fear. They're doing mantras. They're doing meditation. They're praying. They're doing all this kind of stuff, and they will project a very positive being. Whereas when you go to the Skinwalker Ranch, you have people with guns, heavily armed, taking this as a threat, and you get this sort of very negative sort of phenomena where special forces guys are stopped in their tracks and told to leave. They go home, and these wine bottles are flying around the room, smashing against walls and stuff. Completely different event, but completely different setup. You manifest what it is you're producing. The Shasta people, this is an event where 2014, 2015, they came into one of these Zendras. There were 6 people, and they're all standing at the front of this photograph where the little tree is. The people in the Zendra are standing there, and I'm standing where this 10-foot being, and of course he's 4 feet taller than I am, but this being is standing, and everybody, I interviewed almost all the people that were in the Zendra. They basically described the same thing. The interesting thing was, and this is where this idea where you have to start listening to experiencers, and when you hear this story, you suddenly realize there were 6 people inside the Zendra, but they all had different experiences. They saw the same being, but Paula Harris was talking in a foreign language. Other people were getting personal messages. And so it was this same sort of event that was described by Kit Green, that you have 6 people all in the same event, all experiencing something completely different. And these phenomena has the ability to do that, to go into your mind, to project whatever it wants in your mind, and you can be standing beside somebody beside you, and that person will have a completely different event than you. So in 2014, they all described a solid being called Antarel, 10-foot tall being, but they all had these different experiences. In 2015, they described a hologram, that he was over to the left in 2015, and that he was off the ground, and that you could see the trees through him, that he was a hologram. And yet I talked to one 24-year guy who'd been in the Navy for 24 years, and he described to me, he said, I was there, it was not a hologram. So you're having most of the people describing a hologram, and this Navy guy is saying, I could see the lines in his face. He was absolutely flesh and blood. I was standing right there. And so you have these two people describing something completely different. So one's describing a hologram, one's describing something solid. Now, when it comes to abductions, people think it's just the Greys. And I say, be careful what you wish for. This is a story I always like to tell. I had on 2 occasions a woman come up to me and maintain to me that this experience was an alien abduction experience. It is the work of Akiana Karmark, who is one of the most amazing artists in the United States. She has an experience at 5 years old where she disappears, and she did disappear. They had police looking for her. They had tracking dogs. She had disappeared out of her house, and she reappeared in front of witnesses in the hallway, and she claimed that she had been taken by Jesus and into the universe, and she had been shown 1,000 faces, and she had been shown all sorts of things in the universe, and she had come back to paint these things. She's an incredible, she's right now I think only about 25 years old, but has painted all these things that she was told to paint. So if we're going to say there are abductions, the question is, does Jesus or God, because she does sort of describe both events, does Jesus and God abduct people? And because she was definitely taken, she was, and the woman that was a member of the family, a friend of the family, insisted to me 2 years in a row. She came and she said, I can guarantee you that she was taken. This is the way she describes it. Looking back at my spiritual, she calls it a spiritual experience. She disappeared. She was abducted. She was taken. There were many unexplained manifestations. However, no other event had impacted my family as much as the baffling phenomena witnessed one rainy spring day by so many different people. When I was 5, I disappeared. Hundreds of vehicles in our small town were stopped for inspection, and my photograph was distributed through all the local dispatches. I was able to see exactly how many police officers, state troopers, firemen, search dogs, and neighbors were looking for me because of a suspected kidnapping. However, nobody could see me. That's right, nobody. It was as if temporarily I was off the radar, undetectable. I remember splitting into a myriad fragments, hundreds upon hundreds of eyes that could see in all directions and participate in many imperative planetary and extraplanetary proceedings, all at the same time. Then after many long hours, I reappeared in the midst of numerous eyewitnesses, right by the window in the crescent-shaped corridor. Looking back at my... Now this goes back again to this idea that I started with, is the thing about the gray. Now, what I want to describe now is I always knew there was a problem with the grays, where people say, okay, I saw the grays. So what I've done here is I've taken the grays and I'm going to show you all the different grays, and you tell me whether people are describing the same thing, or are we just picking up an idea and reproducing it into what we think we're seeing. So here you have the gray in 1961. Then you have this, I can't remember who saw this gray. It doesn't look at all the same. Then we have the one from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This is the one that Robert Collins claimed that was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This was a sketch that was made of the gray at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Doesn't look like either of the other two. Doesn't have the high ridges over the eyes. So you have 3 different beings, but people are all describing the grays. Then we have Whitley Strieber, and his eyes are different. Doesn't look the same at all. And this is the one where Whitley was going to call it body pain, and Anne, his wife, channels in the middle of the night, and this male voice comes across and said, no, we won't call it body pain, we shall call it communion, because that's what it is. And one of the stories was that this being was supposed to be put on the cover. And if you go to the Communion Amazon site where they're selling the book, you will see people describing, saying, when I saw that being, I knew I had been abducted. It was almost like it was a trigger to the entire world. I talked to one girl who had a 1-year-old child who saw the book on the front stand at a bookstore and said she almost dropped her kid. She knew immediately that she had been abducted. It was a trigger mechanism. So you have this being, but these are all grays. And then you have this one from Canada. This is a book written on the alien encounters in Canada. And these are all abduction experiences written by Bob Mitchell, called Intrusion. Doesn't look anything the same. Then we have my friend Connie, who Tyler D introduced me to, the guy from American Cosmic. He introduced me to her. This is not the being that she saw, but she said this is the closest to the being that she saw, and hers was sort of pink. But this is what the being looked like, but it was pink. And she was taken on board the ship. She's got all the abilities to see the future and heal people and almost the same things you see from other experiencers. But her gray is not the same as everybody else's. In fact, it was a different color. Then we have this gray, doesn't look the same. Then we have Yosef Ronan's in Israel. Sort of looks like a gray, but it's green. Then this is the one that Joseph Burks talks about. This is an interesting story. Joseph Burks has a Russian nurse guy that joins his group. The guy seems to indicate that this is part of a plan that he was told indirectly to come to Burks. At one point, he is going down a road, and the beings tell him to stop, get out of the car. He has a Polaroid camera and said, put the camera on your head, turn it behind you. Okay, take a picture. Now get back in the car and drive. And this is the being that appeared on that Polaroid. And when Stephen Greer saw it, Stephen Greer said, that's the being I was dealing with. I want that photograph. Now, he never did get it. I think the photograph, they photocopied it and then they lost it. But this is a being. So again, you have a gray, but it really doesn't look like the other grays. Then we have this one from the aerial school. Again, it doesn't really look like it. This is Chris Bledsoe's one with the ridge. This is 7 feet. Bluish green. This is the Guardians. Then we have this gray. Looks a little bit different, completely different again. Then we have the one lamb from the famous from the turn of the century that everybody said was a gray with Alistair Crowley. And this is where the whole thing about the demonic thing came in. That this is had to do with the devil. And a lot of this, the people in the government will refer to this one. This is supposed to be a gray. Doesn't look like any of the others. Here's from the Allagash abduction. Again, we refer to gray, but it doesn't look completely different again. Then we have, this is the one with Sparks. And his one has different ridges. It doesn't look the same. And he's taken repeatedly over a number of years and taught this alien language. Then we have the one from the Children of the Greys, the tall gray, who gives the description of the cure for cancer. This formula on the wall. Again, the gray looks completely different. This is one of the tall grays. And basically, I'll leave it at that. Basically, I think we need to look at what are we actually dealing with? What are the beings that we're dealing with? And it's going to be much more complex than people think. And it's going to be a much less physical than people think. And it will have to do, as was shown by this Dr. Tyler, is that energy and consciousness are primary, but the form is negotiable. That these beings are able to project whatever they want. Consciousness is primary, and the idea that there are little gray aliens that are running around abducting people, when you really start looking at the whole thing, it has some real serious problems when you start looking at the actual evidence. And that's what I wanted to do tonight, was to basically show you the evidence and get you to maybe rethink some of the things that we take for granted, which may not be correct. Thank you for listening.